The heart monitor emitted irregular beeps as the 9-year-old boy struggled to breathe. His skin had a grayish tone that made the nurses avert their eyes. Leonardo Ferreira, son of pharmaceutical tycoon Ricardo Ferreira, was dying, and no one could explain why. 17 of the best doctors in the world occupied the private hospital's conference room. Specialists from Boston, London, Tokyo, and Berlin analyzed the tests for the 10th time. MRI scans, CT scans, complete blood analyses. Everything absolutely normal. How could a boy be on the verge of death with all medical indicators perfectly normal? Ricardo Ferreira paced the hallway like a caged lion. His empire was worth billions, he had connections with presidents and kings, but none of that mattered now. His only son was wasting away in that hospital bed, and modern medicine seemed powerless. On the other side of the corridor, Carolina Santos cleaned the floor with automatic movements. She wore the faded blue uniform of the cleaning staff, her red eyes revealing sleepless nights. Her daughter, Isabella, 8 years old, sat on a nearby bench flipping through an old magazine. Carolina stopped cleaning when she noticed movement around the room where Leonardo was hospitalized. Doctors came and went with grave expressions. Nurses whispered in corners. There was an atmosphere of desperation she knew well. All too well. 3 months earlier, she had lived the same scene. The same confused expressions on the doctors' faces. The same despair. But not in a luxurious private hospital like this one. It happened in a public hospital in the outskirts of the city, where her husband, Paulo Santos, had been admitted. Paulo worked as a night security guard and had returned from a work trip to Africa feeling unwell. It started with shortness of breath. Then his skin turned gray. His organs began to fail one by one. The doctors ran tests, but nothing explained what was happening. Within 2 weeks, he was dead. Carolina approached the glass window that looked into the ICU. She pressed her hand against the glass and watched Leonardo. The boy had the same symptoms. Exactly the same. The difficult breathing, the color of his skin, the way his body seemed to be giving up. Her heart raced. She knew that. She had watched her husband die that way. And now she was seeing it again. A nurse walked past her. Carolina touched her arm. "Excuse me, I need to speak to a doctor." The nurse looked at her faded cleaning uniform with disdain. "The doctors are busy. If you need something, speak to the cleaning supervisor." "It's not about cleaning. It's about the boy. I know what's wrong with him." The nurse let out a short laugh. "You know? And how would a cleaning lady know something 17 specialists don't?" "Because my husband died with the same symptoms. Exactly the same." The nurse shook her head impatiently. "Look, I understand you lost someone, but you can't go around making these comparisons. The doctors know what they're doing. But they didn't know with my husband. And they don't know now. Please go back to your work. Don't make me call security." Carolina felt tears burning in her eyes. She tried speaking to other nurses. She tried catching the attention of a doctor rushing past. No one stopped to listen. To them, she was just the cleaning lady. Her voice meant nothing there. Isabella approached her mother and held her hand. "Mom, why won't they listen to you?" "Because we don't matter, sweetheart. To them, we're invisible." At that moment, the alarm in Leonardo's room went off. Doctors rushed toward the ICU. Ricardo Ferreira shouted in the hallway, demanding answers no one had. Carolina watched everything with her heart tightening. She knew that desperation. She had lived it. And she knew how it ended if no one discovered what was happening soon. Later, when the hospital began to empty and only a few doctors remained on the night shift, Carolina made a decision. She wasn't going to let that boy die like her husband had. Not when she knew what was wrong. She went to the locker room and took out the old folder she had carried since Paulo's death. Inside were all his medical records. She carried them everywhere, as if they were a piece of him she could still hold on to. Carolina needed to find someone who would actually listen. It couldn't be just anyone. It had to be someone humble enough to listen to a cleaning lady. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Tell us in the comments what you think and which city or country you're watching from. Your participation is very important to us. In the silent corridor, she saw a doctor sitting alone on a bench, his head in his hands. His lab coat had a name embroidered on it, Dr. Enrique Carvalho. He looked exhausted and defeated. Maybe, just maybe, he was desperate enough to listen. Carolina took a deep breath and approached. This time, she wasn't going to accept being ignored. That boy wasn't going to die the way her husband died. Not if she could stop it. Dr. Enrique Carvalho lifted his tired gaze when he sensed the woman standing in front of him. He was about to dismiss her when he saw the determination in her eyes. There was something there that made him hesitate. "Please, doctor." "Just a minute." Carolina extended the folder of documents. "My husband died 3 months ago. The symptoms are identical to the boy in there." Enrique sighed. He didn't have time for this. But something in that woman's voice touched him. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe the fact that 17 brilliant minds had completely failed. He took the folder. He began flipping through the documents without much interest. Then he stopped. His eyes scanned the medical notes with greater attention. The progression of symptoms. The speed of deterioration. Organ failure without apparent cause. Normal test results despite the patient's critical condition. "Where did your husband work before he became ill?" Enrique asked, now fully focused. He was a security guard at an import company. He had returned from a work trip to Africa 2 weeks before getting sick. Enrique felt a chill run down his spine. He stood up quickly. "Come with me." They walked to the conference room where the other doctors were still debating possibilities. Enrique interrupted the discussion and presented Paulo Santos' documents. At first, there was resistance. Some doctors were offended by the suggestion that a cleaning lady had a lead they hadn't considered. But as they analyzed the records, silence took over the room. The similarities were undeniable. One of the specialists, Dr. Wagner Almeida, a tall man with round glasses, frowned. "If there's a connection between the cases, we need to investigate possible rare pathogens. Something that wouldn't appear on conventional tests." It was at that moment that a figure entered the room without knocking. A man in a flawless suit, perfectly combed gray hair, and a cordial smile. His name was Sergio Brandeo. "Forgive the intrusion, doctors. I came to see how little Leonardo is doing." "Ricardo is an old friend," he said in a soft voice. Ricardo Ferreira appeared behind him. "Sergio came to give me support. We worked together for many years." Carolina stood in the corner of the room, trying to go unnoticed. But when Sergio entered, something inside her stirred. There was something in that man's gaze that deeply unsettled her. A coldness behind the smile. "I heard you found an interesting lead," Sergio commented, approaching. "A similar case." Dr. Enrique briefly explained about Carolina's husband. Sergio listened with excessive attention, asking detailed questions about where Paulo had worked, which countries he had visited, how long it took for him to become ill. Carolina noticed he avoided looking directly at her. As if her presence bothered him. Or as if he recognized her. After Sergio left, Carolina tugged on Dr. Enrique's sleeve. "That man is strange." "Mrs. Carolina, he's just a concerned friend," Enrique replied, distracted with the tests. But Carolina couldn't shake the feeling from her mind. Something was wrong. Very wrong. After years working as a maid, she had learned to read people. She knew when someone was lying, when someone was hiding something. And that man was hiding a lot. She remembered something. Paulo had mentioned a man in a suit who frequently appeared at the import company. A man who asked strange questions about the shipments coming from Africa. Could it be the same one? Carolina waited until the doctors were immersed in technical discussions and left the room. She needed to investigate. If her suspicions were correct, this wasn't just a disease. It was something much worse. She saw Sergio talking on the phone at the end of the hallway. Carolina hid behind a cleaning cart and listened carefully. "No, he's still alive. The doctors are incompetent, but eventually they'll figure it out." Sergio's voice was completely different now. Cold. Calculating. "We have to speed up the plan with the other targets. If they discover the origin, everything goes down the drain." Carolina felt her heart race. Other targets? What was he talking about? Sergio continued. "Ricardo destroyed me. Stole my company, my fortune, my life. Now he'll feel what it's like to lose everything. Starting with what he loves most." The call ended and Sergio put away the phone. Carolina tried to retreat quietly, but bumped into the cart. The noise echoed through the empty hallway. Sergio turned slowly. His eyes met Carolina's. For a second, she saw recognition in his gaze. He knew who she was. "Ah, the widow," he said, walking toward her. "Carolina Santos, right? Wife of the security guard who asked too many questions." Carolina's blood ran cold. He knew Paolo. He knew her name. "Your husband was very curious. He found the crates I didn't want anyone to see. I had to make sure he didn't talk to anyone." Sergio smiled coldly. "Parasites are so convenient, don't you think? They cause a slow death, and doctors never find the cause." "You killed my husband," Carolina whispered, horror and rage mixing in her voice. "I eliminated a problem. And now you're becoming another problem. You know, accidents happen all the time in hospitals. Especially with employees who go where they shouldn't." Carolina stepped back, but Sergio blocked her path. "If I were you, I'd forget everything you just heard. Think about your little girl. Isabella, right? It would be a shame if something happened to her too." Those words hit like a punch. Carolina felt her legs tremble. He was threatening Isabella. Her daughter. At that moment, a nurse appeared in the hallway. Sergio immediately smiled again, nodded politely, and walked away, leaving Carolina leaning on the cart, trembling. She needed to do something. But what? Who would believe the word of a cleaning lady against a respected businessman? And if she told anyone, she'd be putting Isabella in danger? Carolina returned to where her daughter was. Isabella slept on the bench, using the jacket as a pillow. Carolina stroked her hair, silent tears running down her face. Paolo had been murdered. And now she knew who was responsible. That man was trying to kill Leonardo too. And he probably planned to do the same to other children. She couldn't stay silent. No matter the risk. No matter if no one believed her. Leonardo wasn't going to die. And Sergio Brandao wasn't going to get away with it. Carolina grabbed her old cell phone and began typing everything she had heard. Every word. Every threat. If something happened to her, at least there would be a record. The following days were filled with silent agony. Leonardo worsened by the hour. The doctors tested increasingly desperate theories. Next-generation antibiotics, experimental antivirals, treatments that cost fortunes. Nothing worked. Carolina continued her cleaning work, but her mind was elsewhere. She knew Sergio was watching. She felt his eyes on her every time he visited the hospital. He wanted to make sure she wouldn't talk. But Carolina had no intention of staying quiet. She just needed to be smart. During her breaks, when no one was paying attention, she used the computers in the hospital library. She researched African diseases, rare parasites, unexplained symptoms. Her calloused fingers typed slowly, but with determination. It was on a tropical medicine website that she found something. A case report of a centipede-like parasite found in remote regions of Africa. The creature lodged itself in the victims' throats, slowly growing and releasing toxins that didn't show up on conventional tests. The symptoms were exactly the same: progressive shortness of breath, tissue necrosis, organ failure. The article mentioned that the parasite was extremely rare and difficult to detect. Only a direct physical examination of the throat could reveal its presence. Carolina printed the article with trembling hands. That was it. It had to be it. It was exactly what had killed Paolo. And it was killing Leonardo now. She took the document to Dr. Enrique. He read it with growing attention, his eyes widening with each paragraph. "My God," he murmured. "This is it. It has to be." Enrique ran to the ICU and requested an urgent endoscopic exam of Leonardo's throat. But there was a problem. The boy's condition was so delicate that any invasive procedure could kill him. The other doctors refused to authorize the exam. "It's too risky," said Dr. Wagner. "Without concrete evidence, we can't justify it." "The evidence is right in front of us," Enrique argued. "The symptoms, the history, everything points to this. And what if you're wrong? If we kill the boy trying to prove a theory based on something a cleaning lady found on the internet?" Carolina heard those words from the hallway. A cleaning lady. It was always like that. She could be right, she could have the answer, but her social position invalidated everything. The discussion escalated. Ricardo Ferreira was torn between hope and fear. To authorize or not authorize the procedure. Both choices seemed to lead to his son's death. While the doctors debated, Sergio Brandao appeared again. Carolina saw the moment he heard about the parasite theory. His expression changed for a fraction of a second. It was recognition. Confirmation. He knew. That night, Carolina couldn't sleep. She lay on the narrow sofa in the staff locker room, where she sometimes rested between shifts. Isabella slept beside her, breathing softly. Carolina looked at her daughter and thought about everything that had happened. Paolo was dead. Leonardo was dying. Sergio planned to kill more children. And the doctors were paralyzed by fear and bureaucracy. Then a terrifying idea took shape in her mind. What if she did something herself? It was madness. She had no medical training. But she had seen her husband die. She had read everything about the parasite. And she knew there was no time. Carolina began to plan. She knew every corner of that hospital. She knew that at 3 in the morning there was only one nurse on duty in the ICU. She knew the security guards dozed in their chairs. She knew where the basic medical instruments were kept. She had worked there for years. She needed courage. She thought of Paolo, of how he always said that doing the right thing wasn't always easy. She thought of Leonardo, alone in that bed, unaware that someone had put that creature inside him. Carolina also thought of all the other mothers like her. Mothers who lost children because doctors didn't listen. Invisible mothers, whose voices didn't matter. She would do this for all of them. The next night, Carolina waited until she was certain the hospital was in its usual midnight silence. Her heart beat so hard she feared someone might hear it. She kissed Isabella's forehead, who slept, and stood up. First, she went to the supplies room. She had a copy of the key, since she was responsible for cleaning that area. She searched until she found what she needed: a long forceps, a small flashlight, surgical gloves. Her hands trembled as she tucked everything under her uniform. Then she headed toward the ICU. She cleaned that hallway every day. She knew every step, every creak of the floor. The nurse was at the station, but facing away, filling out paperwork. The monitors blinked silently. Leonardo was alone behind the glass, struggling to stay alive. Carolina took a deep breath. It was now or never. She had read the article dozens of times. She knew exactly where the parasite should be lodged. She knew she had to be fast and precise. She used her employee access card to enter. The soft sound of the door didn't draw attention. She closed it behind her carefully. Leonardo was unconscious, the breathing tube still connected. Carolina put on the gloves with trembling hands. She approached the bed. Years of hard work had made her hands strong and steady. She illuminated the boy's throat with the flashlight. At first, she saw nothing. Only inflamed tissue and the tube. But then something moved. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. There it was. Wrapped around the vocal cords, nearly invisible due to its tissue-like color. A long, dark centipede, pulsing faintly. The same creature that had killed her husband. The sight made Carolina's stomach churn. Tears burned in her eyes. This was what had taken Paolo from her. This was it. But she couldn't hesitate. With the forceps in hand, she prepared herself. A voice inside her screamed that this was insanity. But a stronger voice, Paolo's voice, told her to continue. Carolina positioned the forceps. Her hands stopped shaking. In that moment, she was no longer just a cleaning lady. She was a woman with a purpose. She was the only person who could save Leonardo. And perhaps in some way, it was her chance to get justice for Paolo. She slowly inserted the forceps into the boy's throat. The parasite writhed when it felt the metal of the forceps. Carolina followed the movement, trying to grab it without hurting Leonardo. The creature tried to hide deeper in the tissues. Her fingers ached from the pressure. Sweat ran down her forehead. Finally, she managed to grip part of the creature's body. She pulled slowly, feeling the resistance. The parasite was firmly lodged. She pulled a little harder, with extreme care. Suddenly, the door opened behind her. Dr. Enrique froze in the doorway, his expression shifting from shock to horror in seconds. He had woken up with a bad feeling and decided to check on Leonardo one more time. He never imagined finding that scene. "Carolina. What are you doing?" he whispered loudly, rushing toward her. "Wait," she said, without taking her eyes off what she was doing. "It's here. The parasite is here. I got it." Enrique stopped beside the bed and looked. His eyes widened when he saw the creature trapped in the forceps. All his medical training kicked in. He didn't have time to scold the woman. He had a dying patient. "Keep holding it. Don't let go," he instructed, grabbing another forceps from the tray beside him. "I'll help you. We need to remove it without rupturing the body, or the toxins will flood Leonardo's system." Working together, doctor and cleaning worker carefully removed the parasite. Carolina felt every muscle in her body tense. This was her only chance. The creature resisted, its tiny legs clinging to the tissues. After minutes that felt like hours, the parasite came out completely. Enrique placed it in a sterile container. The centipede was nearly 15 centimeters long, its segmented body writhing furiously. Carolina looked at it with a mix of triumph and hatred. That thing had killed her husband. Almost immediately, Leonardo's monitors began to change. His oxygen saturation rose. His heart rate stabilized. Color began returning to his skin. "My God," Enrique murmured. "It worked. You saved his life." The nurse finally appeared, drawn by the noise of the monitors. She screamed when she saw Carolina there, but Enrique silenced her quickly, explaining what had happened. In minutes, the ICU was full of astonished doctors observing the parasite and Leonardo's improving vitals. Dr. Wagner picked up the container, incredulous. "This is impossible. How could a creature like this not show up on any exam?" "Because it's extremely rare and wasn't in the database of any equipment," Enrique explained. "And because no one thought to look physically." Ricardo Ferreira came running in, having been awakened by the staff. When he saw the monitors showing signs of improvement, he fell to his knees. His hands trembled as he tried to process what was happening. "Who saved my son?" he asked, voice breaking. Enrique pointed to Carolina, who was leaning against the wall, exhausted. "Her. Carolina Santos. Your cleaning employee." Ricardo looked at Carolina as if seeing her for the first time. Tears streamed down his face. He stood up and walked to her, then fell to his knees again. "You saved my son. How can I ever thank you?" But Carolina wasn't celebrating. Her mind was working in another direction. She looked straight into Ricardo's eyes. This wasn't an accident. Someone put that thing inside your son on purpose. The silence in the room was deafening. Everyone looked at her as if she had lost her mind. "Mr. Ricardo, I know who did this," Carolina continued, her voice firm despite the fear. "It was Sergio Brandao." Ricardo turned pale. "Sergio? But he's my friend." "He's not. He killed my husband with the same parasite. And he was planning to kill other children." Carolina told them everything. The phone call, the threats, the way Sergio had admitted killing Paulo. The doctors listened in absolute silence. Dr. Enrique grabbed his phone. "We need to call the police. Now." But at that exact moment, Sergio Brandao walked into the ICU. He had heard the commotion and come to investigate. When he saw the parasite in the container and Leonardo improving, his face lost any trace of cordiality. His eyes found Carolina's. "You," he said coldly. "I warned you to stay quiet." Ricardo lunged toward him, comprehension and fury flooding his face. "It was you. You did this to my son." Sergio laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "I did. And I'd do it again. You destroyed me, Ricardo. You took my company, my reputation, my life. I wanted you to feel a fraction of the pain I felt. Leonardo is an innocent child. So what? You had no mercy on me. Why would I have mercy on you?" Carolina stepped forward, her voice cutting through the air. "And my husband? He was innocent too." Sergio looked at her with disdain. "Your husband discovered the crates from Africa. He asked too many questions. I needed to make sure he got contaminated and never talked. It was easy. I put the parasite in a water bottle I left in the locker room. He drank it without suspecting a thing." Carolina felt her legs weaken. Paolo had been poisoned in such a calculated, cold way. Tears of anger burned her eyes. "You're a monster," she whispered. Security had already been alerted, but Sergio kept talking, as if he wanted everyone to know about his revenge. "I got the parasites through contacts in Africa. I discovered they caused a slow, inexplicable death. Perfect. And I wasn't going to stop with Leonardo. I had a list. Children of all the partners of Ricardo who betrayed me." The police arrived then, alerted by Enrique. Sergio was handcuffed, still talking about his revenge, about how Ricardo deserved to suffer. He showed no remorse. Only pure hatred. As they took him away, he looked at Carolina one last time. "You may have won today, but you destroyed the life of a cleaning lady in the process. Who will believe you entered the ICU alone and saved the boy? They'll fire you. Maybe even press charges." Carolina swallowed hard. He was right. She had violated protocols, entered an ICU, and performed a medical procedure without authorization. The consequences could be terrible. The doors closed behind Sergio. Silence fell over the ICU. Leonardo continued sleeping, oblivious to everything, but alive. Breathing. Improving. Ricardo turned to Carolina. He saw the fear in her eyes, the worry about what would happen now. He walked to her and took her hands. "You're not going to lose anything. You're going to gain everything. You saved my son when medicine failed. When I failed. You deserve far more than this hospital can offer." Carolina looked at Leonardo, at the container with the parasite, and thought of Paolo. She had delivered justice. She had saved a life. And finally, her husband could rest in peace. 3 months had passed since that night. Leonardo Ferreira had fully recovered, without any sequelae. The story of the cleaning woman who saved the billionaire's son spread around the world, but Carolina never sought the spotlight. For her, what mattered was that justice had been done. The police investigation revealed the full extent of Sergio Brandeo's plan. He had prepared parasites to contaminate at least 8 other children, daughters of pharmaceutical industry executives. All were warned in time. Thorough physical examinations were carried out. Fortunately, Sergio had not managed to carry out the rest of his plan. The case of Paulo Santos' death was reopened. Forensic experts confirmed that he had been deliberately exposed to the parasite at the import company where Sergio maintained his illegal operations. The discovery weighed on Carolina differently now. It was no longer just pain. It was anger transformed into purpose. Sergio Brandeo's trial was swift. The evidence was irrefutable. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison for multiple attempted murders and for the murder of Paulo Santos. During the trial, he showed no remorse. Only bitterness. Carolina watched the verdict holding Isabella's hand. When the judge struck the gavel, she felt no joy. Only a quiet peace. Paulo could finally rest. And she had proven that invisible voices also had power. Ricardo Ferreira kept the promise he had made to Carolina. He created the Paulo Santos Institute for Neglected Disease Research. The organization had 3 main pillars: researching rare diseases affecting vulnerable populations, training doctors to listen to all patients regardless of social class, and creating hospital protocols that value the observations of staff and family members. Carolina was appointed director of human relations at the institute. Not because Ricardo felt pity for her, but because he recognized that no one understood the importance of listening better than someone who had been ignored her entire life. Her salary now allowed for a dignified life. Isabella received a full scholarship at one of the city's best schools. But the most important change was the one Carolina brought to the institute. She insisted that cleaning staff, security personnel, receptionists, all had a voice. She created channels where anyone could report observations about patients. Often, those who spent the most time near the sick were not the doctors, but those considered invisible. 6 months after the events, the Paulo Santos Institute organized a major international symposium on medicine and active listening. Doctors, nurses, and health professionals from 70 countries attended. The event was broadcast live to thousands of hospitals worldwide. Ricardo insisted that Carolina be the keynote speaker. She had something important to say. Something the world needed to hear. On the day of the event, Carolina stepped onto the stage. Her hands trembled. She had never spoken to so many people before. The auditorium was filled with important figures, renowned specialists, and medical authorities. She looked at the audience and saw Isabella in the front row, smiling. Next to her, Leonardo sat healthy and happy. Carolina took a deep breath and began to speak. My name is Carolina Santos. I worked as a cleaning woman for 15 years. My husband, Paolo, died 6 months ago because no one listened. Leonardo almost died for the same reason. Not because the doctors weren't intelligent. Not because technology was lacking. But because some voices are considered more important than others. The silence in the auditorium was absolute. Every word she spoke resonated powerfully. When I tried to warn that I knew what Leonardo had, I was ignored. Because I was just a cleaning woman. My voice had no value. My knowledge didn't matter. But I had seen my husband die from that. I knew what was happening. And no one listened. Tears ran down the faces of many in the audience. Dr. Enrique, sitting next to other doctors who worked on the case, nodded, acknowledging the truth of those words. My husband said many times that he felt something moving in his throat. The doctors thought it was delirium. But it wasn't. It was real. If someone had looked, truly looked, he would be alive today. But he was just a security guard. Invisible. Carolina paused, letting the weight of her words settle. I had to break into an ICU in the middle of the night because no one listened to me during the day. I had to risk my job, my freedom, everything, because the system has no space for people like me. And that is wrong. Her voice grew firmer, stronger. It doesn't matter if a person is a doctor or a cleaning woman. It doesn't matter if they wear a white coat or a blue uniform. It doesn't matter if they have a diploma on the wall or calluses on their hands. Everyone who cares for a patient, everyone who observes a symptom, everyone who notices something wrong, deserves to be heard. The audience erupted into applause. It wasn't polite applause. It was a standing ovation that lasted for minutes. People openly cried. Doctors hugged each other, promising to do better. Carolina's phrase went viral on social media. Everyone deserves to be heard became a global movement. Hospitals around the world created new protocols. Medical courses began to include modules on active listening and combating class-based biases. Years later, Isabella would follow in her mother's footsteps, working at the institute. Carolina would continue her work, transforming lives, ensuring no voice would ever be ignored again. But that day, on stage, she was simply a woman who had lost her husband, saved a child, and changed the world. Not with money or power, but with courage, determination, and the certainty that every life matters. Every voice matters. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Share in the comments what you thought and from which city or country you are watching. Your participation helps us continue bringing stories that inspire and transform.